A sharp crack echoed through the polished cabin of the private jet as every conversation stopped at once. A little girl gasped, clutching her father's sleeve with trembling hands, while a wealthy passenger stood over them with a furious expression. The poor single dad's cheek turned red where the slap had landed, and the expensive silence inside the aircraft became heavier than anyone could bear. No one knew that within minutes, the very same crew silently watching the humiliation would rise to their feet and salute the man everyone believed didn't belong there. Before this unforgettable story begins, if you believe kindness is stronger than pride, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, and everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. The man sitting quietly in seat 14 was named Garrett Rowan. His faded jacket had been carefully washed so many times that the color had nearly disappeared, and the cuffs showed years of careful repairs stitched together by his own hands. Beside him sat his 8-year-old daughter, Eliza, whose bright smile always managed to survive even the hardest days. She carried a tiny backpack filled with coloring books, a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear, and the only photograph she had left of her late mother. Garrett had once dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer, but life had rewritten every chapter after his wife passed away from a sudden illness. Medical bills consumed their savings. He sold nearly everything they owned, took whatever jobs he could find, and devoted every spare minute to raising Eliza alone. Construction work, warehouse shifts, airport maintenance, delivery driving, and repairing broken machinery became his daily routine. He never complained because every sacrifice was made for the little girl who believed her father could fix anything in the world. That morning they had arrived at a small regional airport after Garrett was unexpectedly invited to attend an aviation innovation conference across the country. Years earlier, while working as an airport maintenance technician, Garrett had quietly designed a mechanical safety improvement for emergency hydraulic systems. The idea had been submitted through a company program, then forgotten after corporate restructuring buried the paperwork beneath endless files. Garrett assumed no one had ever looked at it again. Only days before this flight, someone finally had. The aviation company hosting the conference had discovered that Garrett's forgotten design matched a safety system now being recognized for preventing mechanical failures in several aircraft. They urgently wanted him present for an awards presentation honoring overlooked contributors. Unfortunately, every commercial flight was fully booked because of severe weather disruptions earlier that week. A charter company with empty seats on a corporate jet offered transportation after learning about the situation. Garrett almost refused because he had never stepped onto a private aircraft before. Everything about that world felt impossibly distant from his own. But Eliza squeezed his hand and reminded him that brave people sometimes had to enter unfamiliar places. She smiled all morning because she believed adventures always began with uncomfortable first steps. As father and daughter settled into their seats, many passengers barely noticed them. One woman noticed immediately. Her name was Vanessa Ashcroft, a celebrity entrepreneur whose luxury fashion empire filled magazines, television interviews, and social media feeds. She wore flawless designer clothing, sparkling jewelry, and carried herself with the certainty that wealth measured human value. The moment Vanessa saw Garrett's worn shoes resting beneath the leather seat, irritation crossed her face. She quietly complained to a flight attendant, insisting that someone must have made a reservation mistake. She questioned whether maintenance workers were now flying on executive charters. The attendant politely explained that every passenger had proper authorization. Vanessa refused to accept the answer. She stared at Garrett throughout boarding, becoming increasingly annoyed each time Eliza pointed excitedly toward the cabin windows. Garrett noticed the uncomfortable attention but simply focused on calming his daughter, who had never flown before. As the engines prepared for departure, Eliza accidentally dropped her stuffed rabbit into the aisle while reaching for her coloring pencils. Garrett quickly bent down to retrieve it. At that exact moment Vanessa stepped forward, believing he had bumped into her expensive handbag. Without waiting for an explanation, anger exploded across her face. She accused Garrett of carelessness, demanded he stay away from her belongings, and before anyone could react, she slapped him across the face. The sound froze every heartbeat inside the cabin. Eliza immediately wrapped both arms around her father, tears filling her eyes. Garrett slowly lifted his head. There was pain in his expression, but not hatred. He simply placed one comforting hand over his daughter's. shoulder. The cabin crew watched with visible discomfort. Several passengers looked away, unwilling to involve themselves. Garrett quietly apologized even though he had done nothing wrong. His calm response somehow made the moment even more heartbreaking. The captain, still completing final checks in the cockpit, remained unaware of what had happened. The flight attendants attempted to de-escalate the situation. Vanessa insisted Garrett should be removed from the aircraft because, in her words, people like him lowered the standards of private travel. Garrett gathered his daughter's scattered crayons without saying another word. Eliza whispered through tears that they could leave if everyone hated them. Garrett smiled softly despite the sting on his face that he reminded her that another person's anger should never decide who they become. Those simple words quietly reached more ears than he realized. As the aircraft climbed into clear blue skies, silence settled throughout the cabin. Halfway through the journey, an unexpected mechanical warning illuminated inside the cockpit. It wasn't immediately dangerous, but it required careful evaluation. The pilots followed procedures while informing the cabin crew that they might need to divert depending on system readings. Garrett overheard fragments of the technical discussion while walking Eliza toward the restroom. Years of maintenance experience instantly caught his attention. He recognized the terminology. Without creating panic, he politely informed a nearby flight attendant that he might understand the warning based on previous work with hydraulic inspection systems. The attendant hesitated. Vanessa overheard and laughed openly. She mocked the idea that a man dressed like Garrett could possibly understand sophisticated aviation technology. Still, the attendant respectfully informed the captain. Moments later, the captain personally entered the cabin. Instead of dismissing Garrett, he asked several detailed technical questions. Garrett answered each one with remarkable precision. The captain's expression slowly transformed from curiosity into astonishment. He requested Garrett accompany him to the cockpit. Vanessa rolled her eyes, convinced this ridiculous experiment would waste everyone's time. Inside the cockpit, Garrett carefully reviewed the warning indicators. He immediately recognized the pattern. Years earlier he had developed a modification designed to distinguish between genuine hydraulic failures and harmless sensor fluctuations, reducing unnecessary emergency diversions. The captain stared at him. He knew that invention. Every modern pilot trained on updated safety procedures inspired by that exact engineering improvement. He quietly asked Garrett how he knew so much about it. Garrett simply explained that he had originally designed the concept before life took him away from engineering. The captain became completely silent. He looked again at Garrett's identification provided during boarding. His eyes widened. The name matched the original patent documentation recently circulated through aviation industry recognition programs. Garrett Rowan, the forgotten engineer, the overlooked inventor, the maintenance worker whose contribution had quietly protected countless passengers without receiving proper credit. The captain immediately contacted company headquarters through secure communications. Confirmation arrived. Within minutes, everything Garrett had said was true. His forgotten patent had recently been verified after years buried inside corporate archives. The conference awaiting him wasn't simply honoring a participant. It was honoring one of the industry's most overlooked innovators. The captain removed his headset. His voice carried profound respect. When Garrett returned to the cabin, every member of the flight crew stood simultaneously, without a single command. They raised their hands in salute. The cabin became completely still. Passengers who had ignored Garrett only an hour earlier watched with disbelief. The captain publicly thanked Garrett for his extraordinary contribution to aviation safety, and acknowledged that thousands of families had unknowingly benefited from his brilliance. He also quietly apologized for the humiliation Garrett had endured before departure. Vanessa's face lost every trace of confidence. She stared at the floor, unable to process how completely her assumptions had collapsed. She had judged a man by faded clothes while overlooking the greatness hidden beneath years of sacrifice. Eliza looked around in amazement. For the first time that day, tears returned to her eyes for an entirely different reason. She wasn't crying because her father had been humiliated. She was crying because the world had finally seen the man she already knew. The remaining flight passed with a different atmosphere. Passengers introduced themselves to Garrett. Some asked thoughtful questions about engineering, others apologized for remaining silent when he had been mistreated. Garrett accepted every apology with quiet grace. He never mentioned the slap again. After landing, aviation executives welcomed Garrett and Eliza onto the runway. Reporters gathered nearby after hearing the extraordinary story unfolding during the flight. The company formally presented Garrett with long overdue recognition, financial compensation connected to the patent rights, and an offer to lead future aviation safety research. The amount would completely transform his life. No more endless double shifts. No more wondering whether groceries or school supplies came first. No more hiding financial worries behind hopeful smiles. Yet Garrett's first question surprised everyone. He asked whether part of the compensation could establish scholarships for single parents studying engineering and technical trades. The executives immediately agreed. News of his generosity spread almost as quickly as news of his forgotten invention. Weeks later, Garrett and Eliza moved into a modest but comfortable home that he never purchased luxury cars or extravagant mansions. Instead, he created a workshop where young students could build machines, solve problems, and believe their ideas mattered regardless of their income. Eliza often sat nearby drawing airplanes with enormous smiling wings. She proudly told everyone her father built dreams that helped people fly safely. One afternoon, Garrett received an unexpected handwritten letter. It came from Vanessa. There were no excuses. No attempts to defend her behavior. She admitted that years of success had slowly convinced her that expensive things reflected personal worth. Meeting Garrett shattered that illusion. She apologized not because his achievements made him important, but because every human being deserved respect long before anyone learned their accomplishments. Garrett read the letter twice, then he quietly smiled. Forgiveness had always been easier to carry than bitterness. Several months later, Vanessa accepted an invitation to visit Garrett's educational workshop. She spent hours speaking with students from struggling families, funding equipment, and listening rather than leading. People noticed she had changed, not perfectly, but genuinely. The greatest transformations rarely happen all at once, they happen one humble decision after another. Garrett never forgot the pain of that slap, but he also refused to let it become the final sentence of his story. Instead, it became the beginning of someone else's redemption. Before we reach the end of this journey, leave a meaningful comment telling us what touched your heart the most. Do you believe true character is revealed by how we treat people before we know their success? Years passed, and whenever Garrett visited airports, many pilots recognized his name from training manuals and engineering seminars. Some quietly shook his hand. Others thanked him for making aviation safer for families they would never meet. Garrett always responded with the same humble smile because he understood that the greatest achievements are not measured by applause but by the lives quietly protected through kindness, dedication, and perseverance. Eliza grew into a confident young woman who never judged anyone by appearance. She remembered the day her father stood with dignity after being humiliated, and she carried that lesson into every friendship, every classroom, and every opportunity life placed before her. She often said that the strongest people are not those who win every fight but those who refuse to lose their compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the memory of that extraordinary flight lived on, people rarely remembered the slap itself. They remembered the quiet father who chose patience over anger, humility over pride, forgiveness over revenge, and hope over despair. They remembered the little girl who never stopped believing in her father. And above all, they remembered that true greatness often wears ordinary clothes, walks unnoticed through crowded places, and waits patiently for the day when character speaks louder than appearance.